I'll be.
And my guests are already talking amongst themselves. They already like each other a whole bunch, which is fun. So hi guys, welcome to the Dead Astrologer Society. It's one of those nights. Our producer is calling it a Miller Lite night, and I think I've already secretly been on the air. So if you heard any of my personal drama, I have had an interesting few days myself, and last night I was visiting my shamanic healer and was on the table for 3.5 hours, so I'm not quite where all the people are. So it's a perfect night to do astrology and music, and that's what our lovely guests are going to be talking to me tonight on episode 15 of the Dead Astrologers Society, Music of the Spheres. So tonight I have with me the fabulous Will Morris here from Austin, Texas, who is the president of the AOMA, which is now the Academy of Oriental Medicine. What's the full name?
It is now AOMA Graduate School of Integrative Medicine.
Wow, what a mouthful. And a fabulous medical astrologer, and he's got a band. He's got a band, and he rocks it with astrology and music and metaphysical music. And I also have one of my favorite astrologers, Adam Gainsburg, from Virginia, who is on the line. I think you're in Philadelphia now, right?
I am in Philly, yes.
He's even on the road and is joining us special from the NCGR Astrology Conference, which is going on as we speak, or at least preparing to start tomorrow. Adam's business is soul signs, and he works with sound and astrology in order to help people find their own path to enlightenment. So we're going to have some fabulous conversations tonight. We may even have another guest if we can figure out how to make the connection, but it's one of those nights. As Chad said, it's Miller night. And so we will, if we can get Carlos Cedillo in, we will get him a little later. But as we start, you may have heard me say, I know there's a relationship between astrology and music. I can feel it within myself. I think there's even an old relationship between astrology and music. And today we have two guests who can talk about this idea of the relationship between sound and music and the stars. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this show over to Will, since we flipped a coin while you weren't looking, and decided you could start.
Okay, thanks, Donna. It's great to be here. And I firmly believe, along with you, that there is a very big correlation between sound and astrological practices, and we can see it. We can see it in contemporary tuning systems, the well-tempered scale of 12-tone scale of contemporary Western music. Those 12 keys are consistent with the 12 signs, the 12 zodiacal signs. One, and then 2, the 7 planets are consistent with the 7 church modes. So that's
what's a church mode?
A church mode is, there's 7 scale steps in a major scale. And if one makes...
That's the do, re, mi part, right?
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you for clarifying that. And so each one correlates with a planet. There's 7 of them, and there's 7 basic traditional planets. 7 days of the week, 12 months of the year, 12 cranial nerves, these correlations of, in a sense, a Hermes philosophy of as above, so below. They're all linked, but there are some other possibly deeper and historical roots to these ideas. We can look at literature from China. Let's say look at even their medical literature, the Yellow Emperor's Classic, where they divide reality into 5 elements. Well, there's 5 tones, and there's the 5 basic planets. Remove the sun and the moon, essentially Mercury and Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. Each of those 5 are correlated with the 5 notes in the Chinese, what's called a pentatonic scale, a 5-note scale. And
this is related to we talked about last week with the 5 elements, the wood, metal, or whatever there was. So those are the same.
Exactly right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And don't they call like Jupiter like the wood planet or something, or they each have? Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jupiter's wood and liver, and then Venus is metal in the lungs, and then Mercury is water in the kidneys, and then Saturn is earth in the spleen.
It's fascinating how all these cultures come up with different kinds of correlations for what happened in the sky and other things in the world.
Right. Well, these ideas evolve, right, from cultures which are more in contact with their experience, a direct experience, a Gnostic phenomenon, you might say, of reality. These events that they can see in the sky in correlation with their experience here on Earth, and so all pre-agrarian cultures have this experience, and this becomes sort of, in a sense, a root. And remains in our collective consciousness. We've never been able to divest of this root experience.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
All right, I just characterized that as something that might be desirable to get rid of. Oh, God. But there are other ways in which these cosmological phenomena can relate to music. And that piece that was just playing when we opened up is a piece that I called Sophic Vector. And it was recorded back in the 80s during a poignant moment in the Sophic cycle, which is an Egyptian calendrical moment that has to do with larger, grand cosmological cycles. And one way to do it is it's a method I call resonant theurgy. In other words, it's the practice of music as a ritual and the practice of recording as an art of capturing the vibratory expressions of a given moment, kind of a capture of the sky and the astrological map and the entire experience of the world in the moment, which is a little different than, say, taking a preconceived composition and then recording it at any given time without those considerations. I think I'll stop for a little while.
Yeah, no, I hope you don't, Will. But I just wanted to interject something. That last bit you said, I think, is really opens up a beautiful can of stars because the distinction between composed music where the musician sits down to play, versus or in contrast to the musician or ritualists plural come together at a particular chosen time. Really, it's like selecting a moment to come together and then playing what, lack of a better word, comes through. That's a very, very different use of human consciousness. Playing what you know, what you've practiced, perhaps with other people, even timed together or timed in the right, at an appropriate moment, compared with playing to invoke or make present or make tangible, or even just to musicians who play together in modern day who are just jamming. They're not necessarily trying to, complete a song. They're just jamming. They're improvising. And I think that is, to me, that distinction is like fundamental or primary when we look at the relationship between, I would call it astrology, astrological practice, the astrological scientific art, with music, what we call music or sound, For me, my work, I do a lot more of the latter, where I sit with myself, with other sound makers, toners or whatever, and we come together to invoke something. Sometimes we're just riffing. Yeah. Other times it's for a specific client or a specific intention, a particular area on the planet. It's more of, as Donna, you mentioned earlier, more of a, I'm using this word rather loosely, more of a shamanic kind of leaning type of use of sound. But when that happens, I feel like then the people who are making the sound, who are coming together in that way, it's like we start to make the sound of our composite chart.
Yeah. Yes.
You know.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that. It's very articulate. Yes. Keep going.
No, sorry. I wanted to ask, well, do you work like that?
Yes.
Like where you're riffing, you know? Yeah, okay, you do. Great. Awesome. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see,
it's very rich. I mean, it's a whole different, like I remember listening to a freshman musician, a cellist actually, and he was saying that one time he was in like a workshop and he was asked to play cello, so he played it. And then he went back to, I'd like to play it again from my heart. And he played it again, and by the end of it, everybody was in tears. It was like he was invoking something that was the noumenal moment of the group together, rather than, I know this song, I'm a concert cellist, and I can really evoke something. Here I'm just going to kind of play sort of like from the space of I don't know, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think there's a whole host of approaches to making this happen. And this has been around for a very long time. I mean, the Pythagoras, the Pythagorean cults were heavily involved in the exploration of harmonics and the relationship between the planetary spheres and these kinds of harmonics, and then of course Holst's, in more recent contemporary classicists such as Holst, composition of the planets is essentially an occult expression of planetary forces through a musical, a more formal musical compositional approach that rather than the of course the improvisational presencing of these forces through a community spontaneously. Yeah.
There's another guy today who I know the work of. His name is Nick Anthony Ferenza, and he has a series of pre-recorded audios that he calls bioharmonics or bioharmonic attunements or acoustics. And I'm just thinking about his work in that regard. It occurs to me too, Will, from what you're saying, that when we sit down to listen to music or play music or sing to ourselves or professionally or what have you, it's like we're doing it because we're inspired to do it. We're doing it because maybe sometimes we're paid to do it, as musicians are. But other times, music is used explicitly for the purposes of healing or balancing.
Yes.
And that's a very different approach to it. And when you were mentioning about Pythagoreans and how those cults, which in my understanding, you probably know a lot more about this, but lasted hundreds and hundreds of years after Pythagoras, in various permutations. Is that right?
Yes, actually back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, I studied with a man who actually claimed to be a Pythagorean, a living exemplar of the tradition, unbroken. So there are people out there claiming that kind of connection. I don't know if it's true or not, but he was a music producer, and we engaged, and I worked in some projects with him, and he would have us when we were rehearsing or recording or performing, meditate upon a pyramidal shape within the room between the members of the band, focusing up to a center and placing the groove essentially in that spot, which is, of course, a little bit different. But what you're saying reminds me of a period of time in that same time frame, actually, where I was taking a person's astrological chart, and I used a flute, and I would use there's this one construct where the astrological signs unfold along the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then it goes to C sharp and so forth, and just right around then through the black keys. So I would take the aspect between two planets. Let's say it was a hard aspect. Let's say a square between Saturn and Mars. from Aries to Cancer. So then I would just use the flute to play those notes. And and it was fascinating to sit there and observe the person whose aspect was being played exhibit some of the internal conflict and discomfort associated with such a hard aspect as a Mars-Saturn square. And by the same token, we could use an alchemical resolution of that. Let's say an easy aspect of a trine or a sextile to one of those planets, an easy out, if you will, and play that and watch the breathing become more moderate, and various physiological signs of relaxation and ease take place when playing the aspects and the planets that were within what are considered to be the easier and alchemically resolving types of aspects.
I think that is just super cool. Well, you've taken this about 2 or 3 steps further than I have. The closest I came to what you're talking about is when I've been on in a reading with a client, because I offer healing services as well as the astrology. It doesn't always go there, but when it does, I have a couple tools I can pull out. That I will do sounds, because my main tool is the voice. And what I will do is I will look at certainly what the issue is that the client is facing or being challenged by. But then I will certainly look at their chart, both natal and their triwheel.
Oh yeah.
To see what, just like you say, what would be the alchemical balancing? What might be able to hold that challenging, in your example, the Saturn-Mars square, what might be able to hold that in coherency, not so much to try to change it or fix it, but to try to hold it in a field of love or coherent information through the sound. And so what I'm doing is I'm almost not disregarding or ignoring, but I'm more like my attention starts when the sound starts on this person and somewhere within their total beingness, Mars-Saturn square. And then as the sound starts, I don't know how this works, but for me, the sound starts to kind of give me little sort of sentient feelings to go this way with the sound, or a visual sometimes. But they're very subtle, so the sound just keeps going. And what I find is, actually, what I had found in the beginning when I started to do this, I thought, like the first 5 or maybe even 10 times, after the sound finished, I would open my eyes, I'd look at them, and I almost wanted to ask them, did that do anything? Because I was just making sound, and they said, oh my gosh, I was I feel like I could breathe again, or I feel like I saw my grandmother who I had a lot of love for is no longer alive, or, I'm not implying any kind of hypnagogic kind of effect. I'm just saying that their consciousness popped up into their awareness some kind of more soothing image, the space in which the Mars-Saturn square could be held. But what you're talking about, I think, is just really excites me, because it's literally you can play those sounds and hold those geometries while you're doing it. That's awesome, Will. That's really awesome.
Exactly. And that method really derived from alchemical approaches to astrological healing that were proffered way back in the 70s and 80s by the Church of Light. And it was essentially the idea of, essentially the idea of taking a hard aspect and then finding an easy aspect and playing that one, or using opposite planetary forces. But, Culpeper used oftentimes the same. If it was the ascendant, he would use similar, and then if it was the 6th house, he'd use an opposite, if we're talking about, healing and medicine and so forth. But so it's a pretty fluid thing. It's just like any complex system whereby one may enter into a relationship with any one feature of the system and affect the whole of the moving parts within that system.
Yeah. I was born with probably less than 0, probably some kind of negative amount of musical talent or musical ability. So I've relied on, my just whatever the sound comes out of my mouth. The one thing I do is play didgeridoo, which of course is more rhythmic because it can make a very limited range of tonal frequencies. But I found that too sometimes. In rare cases, I've been able to combine my astrological practice with the the drone sound, as they call it, and in fact, not just relaxation, but have the person kind of journey on their own for themselves.
And so you're playing the didge while they do that? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I'll stop. Sometimes they'll ask me to change or to do this or to, place a didge at their feet so that they're getting the resonance there, or at their heart, or in their crown, or somewhere where they're inspired to. So I actually have a question, if I may, for you.
Sure, certainly.
Yeah. So it's actually two questions. The first is, with that Mars-Saturn example, the flute was chosen. So in the flute, you have the instrument is wood, but the element really is wind, is air.
Yes.
Was that chosen because of the planets or the signs that they were in, or is that just like, or not really? It's like you're good at flute and you just use the flute to make those tones.
It was a matter of convenience because, yes, the flute was one of my main instruments at the time. I also had a synthesizer, so I had this habit of taking the synthesizer and playing a drone made of the two notes for the two signs that were involved in the aspect.
Oh, cool.
And then,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really wild. And then I would take the flute and kind of weave in and out of the different scales that were associated with the planetary presence in each of those signs. And
wow.
And
that's just wonderful. Yeah.
It made some fascinating compositions. Certainly, oftentimes more like contemporary music, more like maybe some contemporary classical music, but still, the person receiving this experience really oftentimes had some extraordinary breakthroughs. Because I was doing a lot of acupressure at the time, so I have a synthesizer in the room, and I just set up the notes on the synth and keep doing the acupressure. And
wow! Wow!
It was very cool.
So let me ask you the next question, and this really gets to kind of a persistent, or I might even go so far as to say an insidious question for me in my client practice as it's evolved over the years. Let's say, okay, so from what you're saying, Will, my mind immediately jumps to, or my imagination goes to, well, couldn't you get an email from someone you've never met saying, Will, I heard about you through so-and-so. I need some help with my Pluto-Moon conjunction. And they send you the birth data, you run the chart, you look at it. You've not talked one word to them. They've just ordered something from you, basically. They made a request of you, and that's it. So could you then go and do it? Or for you, because you are, an OMD or an acupuncturist, do you need the hands-on? Do you need to know their pulse? Do you need to be kind of tactile in touch with them for that kind of thing to work?
Well, if we're working the astrological musical resonance type of field effect, the knowledge that's informing the course of action is different than that of say a conventional Chinese medical practice, which does require in terms of best practices a physical exam and a history, and that requires being present. But there's certainly, with the evolution of telemedicine, that's been changing. But for the purposes of, say, using music as an alchemical solution to an astrological problem, the physical exam is not a necessary event.
Okay. And then you could, what a great thing, get a 5-minute, 10-minute looped track of me playing live to help support you with not just overcoming, but transmuting or growing from a particular difficult aspect.
Yes, and of course, then that can be woven in with either mantras, from the Hindu tradition, or in the Kabbalistic tradition, Kabbalistic angelic presences can be invoked in conjunction with that as an additional tool, but more an additional way of connecting into spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, since you're going,
guys, as brilliant as you are, and I love this, and I'm hoping that now I have a tape to share with the astrological powers that be, so the next time we have a conference, I'm allowed to have a room to put you two in it with a view of and it's so mind-blowingly awesome. But we're going to have to talk about that during our break, because we must have a break for our sponsors. And we will be right back, I promise, so we can have more fascinating conversation. And welcome back to tonight's episode of the Dead Astrologer Society, where, if you tuned into the first half, we were having a brilliant conversation with Will Morris and Adam Gainsburg about astrology and music. We now have Carlos Cedillo on the line with us, who is a Mayan daykeeper and a professional musician. He has done some amazing stuff, and he was on an episode a little while back on Mayan cosmology. So we're going to continue our conversation now on the relationship between astrology, music, and altered states. And we're having a few problems with Adam's audio, so hopefully we will have him back. So hi, Carlos. Welcome.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
And Will, you're still here?
I am still here.
And Adam, if you can hear me, just chime in whenever.
Well,
apparently he can't hear me yet. Well, we will cross our fingers, and we will hope Adam is coming back, because
you got me now.
Yeah, I got you. Yes.
There you go.
Straight off.
Adam is now morphed into Carlos, and it's a whole shape-shifting thing going on, but that's how we roll on the Dead Astrologer Society. So Carlos, how do you use music in connection with your Mayan practice?
Well, I was just going to say, I just did a new piece recently. It was One Monkey Day, a couple of weeks ago. And let's see, what day today is? Today, 7 days ago. And that was like right in the very middle of the Solkin round, the 260-day count. So it was day 131. And started the second half, and a friend of mine actually passed away that day, that morning, and I put a little song together for her. It's a
Linda?
piece.
Are we talking about Linda?
No, a friend named Stephanie Bledsoe in San Marcos. Mm-hmm. She had a fall and head trauma, I think, but it really affected the whole community, and so I did a song for her, but I took an old song that I did probably 2.5 or 3 years ago on a regular calendar, but it was a One Monkey Day also when I did this other song. So I just took the old parts of that song and I just used the bass line actually, and I changed everything else. So it still had the same kind of feel to it, but I kind of updated the instrumentation of it and turned it into an elegy for my friend Stephanie Bledsoe. So these songs always come around in cycles, the same energy. Mm-hmm. So the song that I had done way back then, it carried the same resonance as this day that happened again in the future time, and it had more significance in this more recent round. So every time I record something, I always be sure to mark or use the Mayan calendar name in the title of the song. And I can always refer back to it if I want to remix it on the next time around, or just use the different parts of it, or just share it again on the next time the day comes around, so that that energy you can still hear is very relevant. It's the same kind of galactic harmonic resonance that keeps coming in these patterns of the Mayan calendar. So that's how I use it. And it came in actually very useful this past One Monkey Day last week. So.
Yeah, well, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned the word resonance. It's the same word that Will used when talking about creating healing spaces and finding ways that different configurations in the sky, or in your case, different configurations in the calendar, create resonances that are able to move. I suppose it's all vibration on some level, right?
Right. Well, the difference would be for the Mayan calendar is different from regular astrology. You know, regular astrology would probably look at the planets and their position and see what that resonance is, whereas the Mayan calendar is more of a fractal pattern that comes around again on not just in the cycles, but on different levels of the larger and smaller cycles. The resonance pattern can be found. So that's how the Maya were able to make prophecies that were extremely accurate, and that's why they say the Maya calendar was the most accurate, because of this resonance pattern, and it's more of a fractal geometric based on the Fibonacci sequence that you start to find when you study the Mayan calendar. So I've been using that for almost 10 years to make music now.
Carlos, could you talk a little bit about your approach to composition relative to the Mayan calendar? I think it's fascinating.
Well, what I do is I kind of meditate. I kind of see what happens during the day that might be having a personal response to, or something, and then I start to I use my intuition to find out kind of what instrumentation to use, what kind of rhythms to use, and I start building up the song. Usually I start with rhythm patterns, and then just improvise with the instrumentation, whatever sounds I choose, which is also can be very intuitive. If I find, I have so many sounds on my computer, on my programs, that I sometimes just go by the name of the sound. I don't even know what it actually sounds like, but it's like, oh, that one's...
Yeah.
Name of the sound is on the different synthesizers have so many different names. You can't really tell what they sound like until you just play them. But it's very intuitive, but like I said, I'm just going, I'm trusting what I'm feeling, trusting the energy that I'm picking up on, and that trust puts me in the right space where the magic starts to happen, and it, like I said, it keeps always coming around again. 260 days, sometimes every the 20-day patterns, like on the 20-day cycle, owl days are very good for music. Yesterday was an owl day, and I had 2 gigs that I played.
Oh, that's so funny, that you mentioned that, because I just did a composition last night and recorded it, captured it last night, and it just came out with really no resistances whatsoever. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the theme of the Owl Day is about reconciliation, so it's about finding harmony. And that's the theme in the whole Maya concept of that day. So every 20 days, whenever there's an Owl Day, this is an especially good day for music. Other days are good as well, but they'll have different feelings and themes, and some days are a little difficult to compose. Like Crocodile Day is the very first day of the 20-day cycle. I'll do compositions on that day sometimes, but it's always kind of difficult, and it gets started but never gets finished, because that's the theme of that Emish Crocodile Day, is that
yes,
initiator. It's a base story, but it's not necessarily going to finish. It'll be
yeah.
And so as you go through the 20 days, there's certain days that are really good. Like today is an earthquake day. So today would have more of a feeling of like a reggae or heavy roots or African music, anything that's a real earthy beat to it, real tied to the earth energies. especially like reggae. I know a good friend of mine is a earthquake energy, a reggae singer, and so
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and then Rainstorm Days are Miles Davis and John Coltrane were rainstorm energy, and so that's a real kind of chaotic way out there, but yet real kind of breaking new ground kind of energy. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing after you get in the cycles. You can go to my SoundCloud site, which is soundcloud.com/cosmicjaguar, and find lots of my pieces there, and each one should be named with the day that it was created on, and you can start to get an idea of the different feelings and moods that the music evokes on all the different days.
Nice.
My style is way out there. I mean,
yes.
Getting gigs because people don't know what to do with it.
That's
If you listen to it, that's all. That's it.
Yeah, okay, guys. I'm just asking Chad, the producer, to get on the air with us for a second because I am so enamored of this idea of astrology and calendars and music, and here we have radio, and what is radio designed for but music and fun? And so, hey Chad, wonder producer, what are the possibilities for us to be able to pull in like live music into a forum like this?
Well, actually it could be done as long as you had a microphone sitting in front of whoever's playing live music, and then just Skype it right out.
What do you think about that for like a combined Paranormally Correct and Dead Astrologers Society sometime? Have a big jam session. Bring these guys on, and I bet we could set up some microphones. And
you should have thought of it before the show. That's a good idea.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. That would be fun.
It sounds like a good idea to me, and I think they're going along with it.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a party. So someday in the future, we are going to have a party, and if we have a little extra time, because I'm not sure we can do it in an hour, but if we're doing it with Chad, we could have some interesting things. I bet you Adam would come back on, and I think there's a few other people out there. See, the astrological community, I don't know what it is. We've got some amazing musicians, people with musical talent that never get a chance to perform because we're so locked into staring at our computer screens all the time, and yet for reasons I don't entirely, maybe you guys have an idea. Why would people be equally talented at astrology and music, or calendars and music?
It's the repetitious patterns and the feeling that you get, whether you're looking at the stars or counting the days of the Mayan calendar. There's a feeling and a vibration, and you want to find other ways to express that, and music is one of the best ways. That's what I think.
That's a great explanation. And I think that astrology, music, medicine, mathematics, liberal arts are all, coming essentially from a divine connection. And of course, the Greeks attributed it to the muses. And so the ability to be present with those kinds of subtle expressions of the world is one that's common. So then the ability arrives with the mere moment of having developed a technical skill. But the fundamental skill of that connection into the subtle domain is one that goes across the disciplines, resulting in a transdisciplinary view.
Yeah, I actually do art and painting also, so it all comes out, but it's all directly related to the shamanism and the calendar. So
Carlos, I'm sitting here. I got really piqued when you came on, and I mentioned Jose Arguelles, which is of course a different iteration in the work that you're involved with. But there's another piece that I did which used Arguelles's overlay of the I Ching trigrams upon the Mayan calendar, and essentially just took that to assign a sequence of nodes, and we have that here available to listen to, and that's also from that recording's up on mine on CD Baby. It's called Helios Rising, or no, excuse me, that one's Helios Attunement, because that recording also has a Reiki attunement. So I guess my approach to it's been more along the Western mystery tradition as an approach to this, but I would certainly love to spend some more time exploring what it is that you're doing with that work. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, you guys and me, we are going out sometime, somewhere, because this is the privilege of being the host, is that you get to decide, and since you both live here, I can just say, hey, you, me, bar, chocolate. What else could I want, from the world? And
Sure.
Oh, that would be fun. We could hijack one of the local meetings of some society and say, "Hey, we're having a jam session. We don't need no stinking charts."
Yeah, I just got back from Belize and Guatemala.
Nice.
I was there the last 10 days of July, and explored a lot of pyramid sites, and the pyramids all have these wonderful acoustic properties. I was at Lamanai in Belize, and you're standing in the palace area, and you clap your hands facing the jaguar temple, and the echo that comes back at you sounds like a jaguar growl.
Wow.
When you clap your hands, you go,
Wow.
Sounds like a jaguar. It's pretty amazing. So I would really like to have a jam session down there sometime, but that'll be in another life.
Wow. That is one of my favorite things about this show, is that so often the topics come around to episodes we've already had. Our first episode was on sacred spaces and how sacred spaces created their own resonance that related to, cycles and stars. And here we are again talking about sacred spaces on an episode with music. We're talking about the I Ching, which we talked about last week or the week before. And they just and you guys have been on the show talking about different topics of your own, and everything seems to weave together into this.
I actually used to try to make music with the I Ching. It's a little difficult because everything comes out really dissonant.
Yeah.
I've got some new ideas. I'm going to try it again.
The approach I used was, given that overlay, was to take each of the trigrams and assign it to a note in an octave. So, and then that became just a sequence in the background, and then I would just do, as you do, kind of intuitive selection of sounds and improvisations over the top of the sequence, which is, repetitive, but doesn't repeat yet again for, quite some time. Because the length of the sequence generated by this.
Signing each line, since there's 6 lines and it's black or white, then you got 12 there. And so, but every time I would do it, every scale was always dissonant. Scale could never come up with something that was a nice major chord sound from that. But I've got some new ideas for that, so I'm gonna try it again. I haven't written it yet,
cool.
but
I'll look forward to hearing that.
Yeah.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so any parting thoughts that y'all have?
I used to play with a violin player around the same time as I was doing the work with the astrological chart and doing healing and so forth. And anyway, he used to call it cosmosis, and I'm pretty sure he was right.
I would want to say to be a little more open to what you consider pop music or music that you enjoy, because there's so much music out there. If you listen to stuff from Stockhausen, Luciano Berio, just a list of all these other 20th century composers really doing this amazing work.
Yeah.
It hardly ever gets heard because people are kind of scared of it. They don't know what to make of it. But, and then a lot of the Miles Davis early 70s punk stuff and Coltrane's later stuff got way, way out there. And Sun Ra, of course, was doing some amazing work with the spheres and planets also.
Yes, love Sun Ra.
All right, we are definitely talking to Chad about having a jam session on Paramania Radio. So, unfortunately, another session is now over. So how can people find you? Well,
they can find me, WMORRIS33 @gmail.com.
Awesome.
And my website is frameshifters.com.
Okay, Carlos.
CosmicJaguar.com.
Awesome. And since we lost Adam, I will say that he is at soulsign.com or soulsignastrology.com. It's one of those, but just type in Adam Gainsburg and you will be able to find him. You can also find me, Donna Woodwell, at 4moonsastrology.com and also at just plain old 4 Moons Astrology, and that's FOUR on Facebook. Of course, the Dead Astrologer Society is on Facebook at Dead Astrologer Society or on Twitter at plain old Dead Astrologers. Gotta go. See you next week. I hope you tune in for another fabulous episode, and thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you to all of our fabulous guests.